You are now listening to the Project Kuwait. Where we stop at nothing to bring you the right facts on health, fitness, and psychology. Featuring some of the world's most experienced professionals so you can learn, live, and live. With your hosts, Meg, Dr. D, and Mehdi.
Welcome to the project, guys. We are joined again today by Cathy Cooke, a holistic nutritionist and building biologist. You can check out her first episode with us, episode 110, all about EMF and its effects on your energy. And today she is back to talk to us about the Sleep Easy method, which is launching on March 8th. March 8th. All right. Well, welcome back.
Thanks. Yeah, super fun to be back. I had a blast talking to you guys the first time, so I'm happy to talk about this with you guys now.
Yeah, excellent. So what is the Sleep Easy method?
Yes, so this is a labor of love for me. So I personally dealt with insomnia, pretty severe insomnia for, close to 15 years. And during that time, I just dug really, really, really deep into all things sleep to help myself and to get over this issue, which was just devastating for me. So during the course of that 15 years, I developed so much knowledge about sleep and how most of us are doing it completely wrong. And so after I learned all of this information, I realized, I know that there are so many other people out there suffering from sleep issues. So I really wanted to bring this information to as many people as possible because I saw such huge changes in my health when I dialed all of this in, and not just for sleep, but everything I started to do, like balancing circadian rhythm and blood sugar and, healing gut infections and all this stuff. Everything in my life, all of my health symptoms started to improve.
Yeah.
So I put all of this information into an online program. It's an 8-week module program that just takes you through, step by step, everything that we have to do to improve our sleep and really to improve our overall health. Because when you're not sleeping well, everything suffers.
You can't out-train, poor sleep.
Totally.
You can't, it touches everything.
Yeah. In fact, if you're not sleeping well and you're kicking your butt training, the
extra
cortisol
toxic
response, it just makes everything worse. Yeah, you're more likely to get injured. Your performance suffers, more cortisol. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting knowing that this was the topic we were going to talk about this week. And I haven't really brought up sleep with a lot of people, but just it's funny when these topics come up, I seem to hear more conversations happening like around the gyms or with friends and stuff. And a couple of things that have come up this week are, like around snoring, how it's just kind of normalized for men. And that's something I feel like there can be health issues obviously along with that and sleep apnea. So just normalizing of like, oh, well, guys snore. That's not really a problem or not a red flag. Others of, like timing of when to eat before bed and what kind of issues that can cause. And then a lot of people, I think, just not really understanding the connection between morning routines and how that may affect, bedtime or what happens throughout the day. So I think it's awesome that we're going to go through this and give people a little insight to maybe some of those common things that have been normalized, but are actually maybe a little bit of a red flag.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what's the first bit to get into?
Okay. Yeah. So the first module that I have in the program is all about blue light. Right. And the good thing about this is that the topic of blue light is becoming there's a lot more awareness around it. In fact, anybody who has a prescription, eyeglass prescription, it's almost standard now that they put like a little bit of a blue light blocking glaze on the glasses whenever you get your prescription refilled. So it's pretty standard now. So it's pretty mainstream, but most of us still aren't doing a good job at balancing our light exposure in general. So I put this in the module first because it's inexpensive to do. It's very simple and you will get immediate effects. So light exposure in general is a really big topic. But what I'm most concerned about for sleep is blocking that blue light in the evening. Because if we have artificial light, so by artificial light, I'm talking about any light except sun and fire, right?
Right.
So what all of us do when the sun goes down is we turn all the lights on in our house at night, right? And that artificial light is telling our brains that it's daytime. And it has to do with the spectrum of the light bulbs, which is predominantly blue, because in the sun we have all the colors, and there's a significant amount of red. And really, we have all the colors in that spectrum. But our light bulbs are predominantly blue, and they're overhead,
Right.
which is this unconscious signal to our brain that that's the
like
sun.
high noon.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So getting that exposure to that blue light suppresses melatonin release. So if we don't get melatonin release, of course,
Sleep is going to be
we're not going to start to get sleepy. So we really need to manage that light. We need to manage our artificial light exposure all day long.
Right.
I mean, we can't be sitting in front of a TV. Why did I say that? I mean, a computer or a TV. Some of us are in front of a TV. Phones, computers, tablets, overhead lights. I mean, we have this artificial blue light kind of penetrating our eyeballs all day long. And it really, interferes with our nervous system. And there's also flicker that's happening that we can't perceive, which is really disturbing to our nervous system. And so for sleep purposes, if we're not getting melatonin release and our brain thinks that it's the middle of the day because we don't turn the lights off until 10 or 11 at night, it's no wonder that we lay down and our minds are racing and we can't fall asleep.
Right.
So there's a number of really simple things that you can do to block the blue light. And one is just being aware of how much we're turning the lights on. We don't need every light on in the house, right? Like, this is what my parents do. They live in a 3,500 square foot house and they have every single room, the lights on in every single room.
Right.
I'm like, why are you guys doing this?
It's not necessary.
Yeah. So keeping the lights turned off, or you can use like orange light bulbs.
Okay.
And the red, you could use red or orange typically are the colors we're going after. And I like to use these strategically. Like, obviously someone's not going to use those in every room in their house. I mean, the kitchen, if you have an orange light, that's kind of weird. But like in your bedroom, you shouldn't
maybe like your lamps and things like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I have a lot of clients actually who will just in their bedroom, like they read at night and they'll do that with the orange light bulb with the lamp next to their
nice
bed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, strategically using it like that. I use candles still. I mean, people think, I don't know, like I
started using candles. I think after our last conversation, we talked a little bit about light exposure, and my boyfriend and I now, that's kind of like the nightly routine is we'll go candle lit. Nice. As we're kind of winding down for the night rather than having, and it used to be just like one of the like maybe entryway lights on. So at least a little bit dimmer, but now the candlelight is really nice. That is a fun kind of part of the evening routine.
Yeah. And the ambiance is calming.
Very much.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. So candles and then just blue light blocking glasses.
Yeah.
Which, there's so many out there now. And you can get all kinds of different styles and they make them that are really fashionable now. So you don't look like a huge dork, but the blue light blocking glasses for me were the total life changer. It changed everything for me. And it's just so imperative to manage that blue light exposure in the evening so that you get that melatonin release. And, melatonin is one of the main antioxidants in our body that helps with DNA repair.
Right.
So it's really, really important to optimize our melatonin release. It's helping us fight cancer essentially.
Right.
So we really need to pay attention to that. And that's the first module.
I have a question about melatonin because I think people are tuned into melatonin. They know that it helps with sleep. I don't know that they know maybe some of the other benefits and properties that it has, but I think one of their ways to deal with poor sleep and knowing that melatonin helps with it is that they'll supplement with melatonin. And I've heard some conflicting things on this, that supplementing with it also kind of suppresses your body's natural production of it. So is controlling the blue light exposure obviously is probably a better option than supplementing with it, or when do you see it fit to supplement?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not a huge fan of people taking melatonin all the time.
Right.
Because like you said, there's that negative feedback loop. So if we're getting it exogenously all the time, then our body just kind of gets lazy and says, oh, well, I don't need to make it.
Right.
So I'm not a fan of long-term use. However, there are times where it can be a benefit. Like if you're traveling, if you're crossing multiple time zones and you want to, help to reset your circadian rhythm of the new time zone you're in,
Oh, that
it
makes
can
sense.
be helpful there. And of course, when you come back, same thing. If that's a situation that somebody's dealing with, I say, a week to 2 weeks is good to kind of get your circadian rhythm back. But I'm not a huge fan of taking it longer than that. However, it's really helpful to actually support our body's defenses against EMFs. So in today's world, I'm starting to question whether or not we should be supplementing a little bit more with melatonin if we're in this environment, this high EMF environment that we can't control.
Yeah.
Because we need those defenses. It's not ideal. I haven't really come to that conclusion yet, but I'm kind of exploring that option because for those of us that just can't get away from these huge, like if you're a pilot or, an airline stewardess or whatever your job is, something like that, that just hugely bombarding you with these EMFs all the time, then there may be a case to take melatonin consistently, even though I'm not a huge fan of it, but we're kind of battling some of these bigger issues just from our modern world.
It's kind of like a lesser of two evils thing. It's like choose that versus, any other types of medications or, something to try to feel a little bit more balanced in your sleep. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So does that kind of take us into circadian rhythm you've brought up a couple of times?
Yep. So the second module is all about circadian rhythm.
And that's just understanding like sunrise to sunset and kind of getting our bodies to match that cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm surprised so many people have not heard about circadian rhythm. So I guess it's not as a common topic as I thought, but yeah, so our body has its own internal clock. Just like the sun does, right? Sun comes up every day, sun goes down. The animals do their things at different times of the day. I mean, the whole earth has its own clock. And we do too. It's our own circadian rhythm, our own body clock has a very unique rhythm. But we are very out of sync with that. We're very out of touch with that because we turn lights on in the middle of the night. We artificially extend our day. So when we're looking at screens, we have lights on. This circadian clock is just blown because we're getting these different signals about, what's actually happening. So it's super important for people to get the circadian rhythm back so they're sleeping at appropriate times. We should be going to bed by 10 every night and waking up at, 6 or 7. And a lot of people aren't doing that. That's really kind of the optimal time for sleeping. And it starts the very first thing when you wake up. Like you mentioned, the behaviors that you do in the morning help to reset your circadian rhythm for the entire day. So It's not like we can just, block blue light at night. We have to actually consider our circadian rhythm throughout the entire day.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that I recommend people do is go outside first thing in the morning. And people struggle with this, but I mean, it's worth every second of it. It's cold or it's hot or people don't want to go outside, but you just have to. It's non-negotiable.
Yeah. I said the same thing for some clients. I had made even a little like morning routine video. And the first thing I said there was like, let that sunshine hit you right in the eyeballs in the morning. The first thing, open up those drapes and just let that light in. It is good sleep definitely starts first thing in the morning.
Yeah. So, there's multiple ways to get your circadian rhythm in sync, but that is crucial. And that's the first step, getting outside first thing in the morning and then seeing the sun throughout the day because, if we're inside all day and we're in a windowless environment, we miss those cues.
Totally.
It's kind of like, have you ever been to, you go to a movie at like 3 and, it's day out and when you come out, it's like 6 and it's dark.
Yep.
And you're like, oh my God.
It messes with you.
Yeah. It's
it
totally
really does.
confusing. So it's kind of the same thing. We're not getting our body's not getting cues about what time it is. And that really disrupts our circadian rhythm. So that, of course, impacts sleep in a lot of ways.
I really think about this a lot with one of my first businesses that I started on my own. It was in Kuwait and it was geared towards military contract workers. And it was a food prep program because they work 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts. plus their drive time to and from base, which, you know, can add up to a few
Holy
hours in a day.
smokes.
It's rough. So that one day that you get off, like the last thing those guys want to do is go grocery shopping and meal prep and all that. So a friend and I had created a food prep program where we just made healthy home cooked meals and delivered it to them twice a week so that they could eat well.
So cool.
Yeah, it was a great business. I absolutely loved it. And it turned, you know, very social and meeting other Americans that were out there. It was pretty cool. But I just think about so much like seeing some of those guys who had joined my program, you know, when they first got out there, first on the job, and then, you know, watching them throughout the year of just physically changes that you would see in them because of such a rough sleep schedule, you know, and there's no time for really like, you know, social interaction and social life. And then also that especially if they're on the night shift. I mean, that's just how, I mean, I know like, you know, testosterone issues were a big thing for them, you know, after that. And so I think a lot of them, you know, reach to, you know, supplementing in different ways to kind of help with that. But I think about those shift workers. So somebody who is working night shift, like you mentioned, going to sleep at 10 and waking up around 6. So anybody who's working like in a night shift schedule, you know, what kind of suggestions do you have for that?
That's such a good question and a really tough situation. And I do actually address that specifically in the course because because it's a big issue. And I realize that you know, hospital workers, drivers,
nurses,
EMS, emergency responders. Yeah, there's a lot of people that work night shifts and we need them. It's important. Right. My heart goes out to them because it's very difficult. And when you look at the research showing the health implications of shift workers, I mean, it's very sad. So much more illness and disease among shift workers. So, you know, what I'm always suggesting to people is if you get the opportunity to go to a day shift, you should absolutely jump on that. You know, it's usually a lot of times when people enter a career like a nurse, you know, she's put on the night shift. He is put on the night shift because you're kind of, you know, on the bottom rung there. Right. And at some point, you generally will have an opportunity to move to days. And I always recommend that if anybody has that opportunity. If you don't, you know, this is where some of like the light boxes will come in handy. They're not, I mean, they're nowhere near the same frequencies as the sun, but I know a lot of shift workers that use them and feel dramatically better. Okay. So trying to mimic that.
What is the light box?
So there's multiple different light boxes. Like Happy Light is one, or what are some other ones? Lux maybe is a brand, but it's essentially a box that you sit in front of that has this as close to the spectrum of the sun through a light bulb.
Okay.
And so you sit in front of it for, you know, 10, 20 minutes to get that light exposure if you can't get the sun exposure. Right. And now they're making a lot of lights that are red that use. I was
gonna say like an infrared sauna or something. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. So the saunas are amazing. But there's a lot of just like they're making now just little panels. So it's like a light box, but it's emitting the red, the far infrared, the near infrared, which will mimic some of that sun exposure too, which I would absolutely recommend for shift workers. And then, you know, this is a situation where supplementation, I think, is important, and specifically like antioxidants, you know, because the oxidative stress we're getting from that, you know, working nights, lack of sun exposure. Vitamin D might be important. You know, I mean, I want people to test their levels, of course, but I would suggest vitamin D supplementation, fish oil or cod liver oil, which is naturally has vitamin D. And
vitamin D is also like fat soluble, right? So you need a good source of fat to take it with.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So a good, like your biggest meal of the day, is good for that. So just trying to mimic, you know, that exposure as much as you can, because it's a bummer for people, but, you know, do our best.
Right. Yeah. Right. Those are good tips though. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
How about like someone, I'm just trying to think of some other kind of scenarios of like, do you get into like new moms or, you know, any of that kind of stress and sleep?
Gosh, it's a good question. And I debated that. But there's not a lot. You know, I mean, I think it's important to make sure that your children are following all of these rules as well.
Right.
You know, so if we can help our kids, I mean, you know, an infant is one thing, but if we can help our kids train their circadian rhythm, I mean, babies need morning sunlight too.
Right.
And we're not doing that, you know? So
or night lights in their room and things like that. Yeah.
Wi-Fi routers, cell
Yep.
phones, whatever.
Yep.
If we put all of these things in place for our kids as well,
Yeah.
then that's going to help them sleep through the night.
Good
also.
habits to start with. Yeah.
Yeah. And they make night lights that are orange, little orange light bulbs. So if your kid has to have a night light, just make sure it's orange.
Orange. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a really tough one. I mean, my heart again goes out to new parents, but I think people really aren't paying attention to these circadian rhythm steps for their kids. So
Right.
that should go a long way.
No, that's a good point. That's a good lesson to have in there. It is something. And it's funny you mentioned like you're surprised at how many people don't think about it. And when you mentioned you've been going through this for like 15 years,
Right.
Is how long your research goes. And it is, I had this conversation with somebody else the other day too, of like those little things that you end up kind of taking for granted or you don't understand can be so impactful and mind blowing for somebody who's just hasn't, become aware, been turned on. Yeah. Turned on to it. So that's great.
Yeah.
Love it. And the next module is.
Yes. So the next module is EMF.
EMF. Okay.
And we talked all about that in the first show. So I don't know if you want to get into that one.
I have put a silver screen over my router in my
cool.
house.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is one change that I have made. Yeah, and then we continue. Yeah, no phones and things in the bed. My boyfriend has stopped sleeping with his watch on.
Oh,
So,
sweet.
yeah, it has been noticed a lot. Snoring is something that we deal with. So when we get to the snoring topic, I will be interested to hear more about that. But other than that, the EMF mitigation, that has been just something, I'm just much more aware of like the Bluetooth on my phone and things like that. And I think I just feel better just knowing that I've kind of shut those things down, physically and stuff. I know I've been sleeping a little bit better. And that could just be, I don't know, that could be a variety of things as well. Sure. But I do feel better just knowing that I have kind of limited the exposure of those types of things. And
I mean, taking steps to being proactive about your health makes you feel better, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So why not?
And it's just making a choice that I think, can have an impact and you feel good about it. And if anything, it's just getting away from the phone a little bit more and the devices a little bit more. I think that's a big part of it.
Absolutely. And I mean, the freedom you get when you stop staring at your phone so much, you open up so much time.
Yeah. I did also play with the settings on my phone of changing it to grayscale and having no color on the phone.
Oh,
it's like, it is a great one. If you can challenge somebody to do that for an entire day, it's remarkable if somebody could get through that. But you're so uninterested in what's on your phone when it's in grayscale. You can't even stand to really look at it.
That's super fascinating. So it's funny. I didn't even know you could do that. I mean, I'm telling people to put the red setting on at night, but
you can, but there's also a grayscale option. And I played around with that. And it was every time I picked up my phone, I was like, I don't even want to look at it.
Gosh, that's so cool.
It makes everything, way less interesting.
What a great tip. I love it.
Yeah. Especially with kids or babies, as well. Like they're really drawn to colors and, things like that. And if you can kind of turn that on, it kind of has the same effect. Like they're more drawn to colors, like we're more drawn to colors, so when you turn it in that grayscale, there's just not as much of a desire or attention towards it.
Wow. Awesome.
It's amazing.
Good tip.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So after EMF,
then we
get
have
into?
Blood sugar balance.
Okay.
Which is something that nobody's thinking about for sleep.
Right.
But it's so important. So important because when our blood sugar dips too low, for example, then cortisol is released. Because cortisol is what tells the liver to release glucagon, which is to rebalance the blood sugar in our blood. So it's interesting that at any one time, the amount of sugar we have in our bloodstream is about 3/4 of a teaspoon, which is really a tiny amount. And it's tightly regulated. And, if anyone with diabetes, which most of us do, we know that when that gets too high or too low, there's blood, sugar in our bloodstream, that's a very serious situation. Yeah. So the body works very hard to regulate that balance. And when our blood sugar dips a little bit too low, cortisol then, starts this cascade so that we can bring that blood sugar back into balance. But when cortisol is released, that's very stimulating.
Right.
So when we don't have our blood sugar balanced throughout the day, I mean, all of us have experienced this. When we start to get really hungry and our blood sugar drops, we get cranky and irritable. We can't really think clearly, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
But what we don't realize is that this is often happening during the evening, at night while we're sleeping. And so we often wake up in the middle of the night because our blood sugar is so low because we get that cortisol release. And really, it starts just like with circadian rhythm. We have to balance our blood sugar all throughout the day for it to be very stable, even in the middle of the night. Because if we're going through these blood sugar fluctuations all the time, then our adrenals are impacted, and our adrenals are not functioning as efficiently as we want them to. And so this creates more of those fluctuations and more of that cortisol release. Right. So we have to be balancing our blood sugar throughout the day. And, this is going to be different for everybody as far as the macronutrient ratios. I mean, we have to really pay attention to how much fat we need, how much carbs we need, and how much protein. Yeah. And everybody's going to be a little bit different. If you're training really hard, you're going to need more carbohydrates, right. Unless you're doing keto or something like that. If you're pregnant, your needs are going to be very different. If you're elderly, if you're young, whatever it is. Right. So everybody's needs are going to be a little bit different, but it's really important that we dial in the specific needs so that we keep our blood sugar really stable. It's really supportive for our nervous system. And then hopefully we won't get that huge spike in the middle of the night, which a lot of us are, and we don't realize that that's why we're waking up.
Okay. So does that play into, kind of that, I don't want to say like a myth, like eating before bed or how long to eat before you go to bed? Does that really have an impact on the blood sugar balance?
Well, so that again it's going to be person dependent.
Okay.
So ideally I would like people to, stop eating 3-4 hours before bed. But for some people, that's going to have the opposite effect of what we want. So I actually have a snack before bed because for me, that helps me with balancing my blood sugar overnight. And there's many reasons why I have that. I mean, I have a history of Lyme disease and really high mercury issues and, some other stuff that makes it more difficult for me to balance my blood sugar. So a snack before bed for me, a small snack, can be really, really helpful. And, I have a lot of clients that are like that, but most people should be able to stop eating, 3 hours before they go to sleep. And it actually is beneficial because if you're eating right before bed, what happens with a lot of us is we eat and then we digest it, let's say an hour, 2 hours later, and then our blood sugar dips and then we get a spike. And that happens often. So, it really is person dependent. For me, it helps. For most people, it's going to have the opposite effect. So for some of us, it's just kind of dialing that in.
It's kind of like a trial and error. And
yeah, we kind of have, exactly. And actually for a lot of people, it also has to do with how stressed you are.
Right.
So if you have a newborn, you've got a really stressful job, you're going through a difficult time in your life. Actually, those are the people that having a snack before bed can actually be helpful for because it's this adrenal dysfunction or HTA axis. And so that can be very helpful. And I often recommend for those people to have a little snack by their bed. So when they do wake up in the middle of the night, if they can have a little snack, and I'm talking like, I don't know, half a banana with some almond butter or, a little bit of cheese if you do dairy and some rice crackers or something like that. Just something with a little carbohydrate, a little protein, a little bit of fat. And that can be really, really helpful to just help someone fall back asleep. Because often when that happens, someone will wake up and they're up for 3 hours.
Right.
But having that little snack can actually help you to fall back asleep and then sleep through the rest of the night. It's not ideal. I don't like people to eat in the middle of the night, but I prefer that over being awake for 3 hours.
Yeah. This is weird. This just kind of popped in my head as we were talking about this, but my boyfriend used to be kind of the person who would wake up, like he'd be in a full dead sleep and then wake up and just want to go straight to the kitchen. And I was like, what are you doing? Like how you were just dead asleep. How are you even hungry right now? Wow. But it makes sense of probably some blood sugar. And it's interesting. He's been working out a little bit more lately, plus we've made the changes with the, the phones and the light exposure and the EMF and all that kind of stuff. But I haven't noticed him having that habit in the last month or so. So maybe some of that is all kind of tied together.
Well, EMFs will actually disrupt your blood sugar.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, everything we've already circadian rhythm affects blood sugar, blue light, all of it that we were talking about affects blood sugar. So
just making some of those simple changes, and it's already made a big impact on just, being able to stay asleep through the night and maybe controlling some of that blood sugar. Yeah. I didn't really just think about that until now after we've kind of like talked about all of this at once. That's awesome. Cool. Good for me too.
Yeah. Right.
Awesome. All right. So sleep hygiene is the next module.
So sleep hygiene, which is something most of us are familiar with, and most of us are hopefully addressing it to some degree. But this is just, your environment, your nightly routine. But there's a lot of it that people aren't doing or aren't aware of. So, it starts with some of the EMF. Reducing your EMF exposure is going to create a good sleeping environment. So what we want to really focus here on is having our bedroom and our nighttime be our sleeping sanctuary. So our bedroom needs to be as inviting, as clean, as comforting, as conducive to sleep as possible, so that our mindset is in this place of, this is where I sleep. I mean, I can't believe how many people that I know who have like a computer in their bedroom, or their little office is in their bedroom. Yeah. Right. Or they'll have a file cabinet with some of their office documents. And you don't realize that subconsciously you see that. And then what happens? You start thinking about work.
Right.
And then your bedroom needs to be, like I said, a sanctuary for sleep only. And that's
even like laundry for me. I've like removed like having laundry in the bedroom, because then you go in and you're just like, God, I have so much stuff to do. And it's like, no, just clearing that out and getting that out of the way.
Totally.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Even if it's just a little bit of clutter.
Yep.
You don't realize how impactful that is for your brain. And then you get stimulated and your brain starts going, and then it's over. So, whatever you can do to make your bedroom as simple, clean, and inviting as possible. And that might mean you get a new mattress, because your mattress is horrible. You need better bedding. I mean, you get, you buy some cheap sheets and they're scratchy, and that wakes you up at night. So you want it to be really kind of luxurious. The colors matter. You don't want like bright, energizing colors. You want it to be nice and cool and calming to you. And then just habit-wise, we're talking about like having a nightly routine. Right. So you're not working until 10 on your computer, and then you just, you say, okay, I'm going to bed. Like, you need your mind to wind down. You need to go through a habit every night that's giving yourself cues that, oh, it's my bedtime. I do this every night. Oh, okay, I'm winding down. It's getting time for sleep.
Yeah.
And that could be, putting your clothes out for the next day, washing your face, brushing your teeth, whatever.
Before I start like a lot of those tasks, I'll go and I'll turn on my diffuser with like some kind of a calming oil or something. I'll let that go in the bedroom while we kind of hang out by the candlelight or start bedtime, brushing teeth and all that kind of stuff. And then by the time you get in your room, it kind of already has that sanctuary, inviting type feel. So that's like one of my favorite parts of a bedtime routine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it gets your subconscious going, oh, bedtime's coming. So you start to get sleepy.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Like that.
And then just other hygiene things like, the blue light blocking glasses, of course. Some people do a little meditation routine before bed, or, some yoga stretches. There's a lot. I mean, it's really, again, this is going to be kind of person dependent as well.
Right. And I think it was in your Facebook group, you had done a little video about, this kind of gets into morning routine, but also sleep hygiene, I think, about making your bed.
Yes, that's a good topic. So, and I'm actually suggesting not making your bed.
Right.
For air quality purposes. Yeah. So it's so funny, because when I'm listening to, health gurus out there, and they're always saying, you got to make your bed. You got to
first thing in the morning. Yeah.
And I'm like, no, don't do it. Mostly just because we are creating this super perfect environment for dust mites and bacteria and, microbial growth to grow, because we sweat, we perspire at night, we all do. And so we have this really moist, warm environment, which dust mites and bacteria love. And then we get out of bed and we make our bed, and they're going to proliferate like that. And there's a lot of people out there that are having allergic responses to dust mites.
Right.
and they don't know it. And that's keeping them up at night because they're getting congestion and they're having respiratory issues. As a building biologist, we really recommend letting the bed air out. And if you have a window that hits the bed, opening that window to let the sun sanitize it is awesome. So people really struggle with this. But what I say is, okay, just fold the sheets down really nicely towards the end of the bed.
Yeah.
You can make it all nice and neat. So you still got that, mental,
tidiness
support.
or whatever.
Yeah. So it feels like you made the bed, but you're still letting it air out.
Yeah.
Or you can just let the bed, pull the covers down and then go back in 2 hours and make it or whatever.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, it does make sense.
It's a great tip. I've started that opening up. Well, we sleep with the window cracked open just a little bit at night anyway, just to get a little bit of fresh air and keep the room a little bit cooler. I guess, is that something else like sleep hygiene considered about the temperature of your sleeping environment?
Absolutely. Yes. Most people are sleeping way too warm.
Mm-hmm.
And we set our thermostats and leave them at 72 degrees year round.
Right.
And, if we were sleeping outside in nature, as we've kind of evolved to do, we would get much cooler in the middle of the night. So a lot of times if you're waking up at, 2, 3, 4 a.m., it's because you're too hot.
Mm-hmm.
Because we should expect that temperature to go down quite a bit because it's coldest at about 4, 5 a.m. So our body temperature should be dropping all night long.
Okay.
So I'm a huge proponent of sleeping with the windows open. I think it's really important for that air circulation. And I mean, if it's in the summer and it's hot, well, the temperature's still dropping in the middle of the night. But, some people use things like a chili pad. Have you heard of a chili pad?
No, I haven't.
It's really cool. I actually interviewed the owner of the company for my program. I have an interview with her inside the course. And it's all about this product that they make. It's like a sheet and you put it on your bed, but it runs water through tubes it's like a pad.
Oh.
And then you set the temperature for what you want it to be during the night. So you can set it to cool down like at 2, 3 in the morning or something. So it helps to regulate your body temperature overnight. And it's super cool. It can be really
chili pad. I'm making a note of that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The chili pad, it's called Chili Pad and Euler. And she actually gave me a coupon code for like 15% off, 20% off or something.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so I could give that to you for if any of your listeners want to check it out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's cool. It can be a total game changer for people because that temperature regulation, especially, women who are going through menopause or having night sweats or people with hormone stuff, we don't realize that one of the reasons we're waking up is because we're,
temperature
overheated.
Yeah. Amazing. There's a lot with sleep hygiene. Like, it's funny, you hear that term and you don't really think about all that stuff being involved. That's great.
There is. And I mean, we go a lot deeper inside the course just because we got to kind of identify our specific needs,
Right.
I mean, none of this, a lot of it is kind of a blanket statement for everybody, but helping people really dial in what they're dealing with is kind
take inventory. And then what level of challenge are you up for?
Yeah.
And,
Right, exactly.
revamping that. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So that leads us into stress and exercise.
Yes. So everybody knows this. Everybody knows that they have to move their body and they have to manage their stress.
Yeah.
And I lump these two together just because exercise is the ultimate, stress relief. So the problem that I find though is that nobody's actually putting stress management techniques into place. People are exercising, but what I see in today's world, and a lot of people that come to me, it's a lot of paleo people, CrossFitters, people are getting into a lot of this more high intensity exercise, and that's all awesome. And I love it. But people are going overboard. And if they're super stressed out and they're not sleeping and, whatever their lifestyle habits are, and then they're killing it at the gym, they're really doing themselves a disservice.
Yeah. Because
they're not exercising appropriately. So the stress management piece of this is critically important for the adrenal, the HPA axis, like I mentioned earlier. So we have to support our nervous system. Otherwise, everything else falls apart. If we have all of this cortisol, high cortisol going all the time, we're not going to sleep. We're not going to perform well. We can't balance our blood sugar. Our mental health suffers. I mean, everything suffers.
It's all connected in that load. And that's something I was just talking to a couple other people about. And it's like people who are typically driven towards joining, those high intensity boot camp classes or a CrossFit class and stuff there. Somebody who's generally already high cortisol driven, right? Like they've seen somebody else have success in losing the weight or, getting stronger, whatever it is. And they're kind of already in that mode of like, I need to make this change. I want to make this change, and just, stressed out, probably digestively, emotionally, environmentally, relationships, whatever it is. And then getting into this community, it is very community driven, which is awesome, but it can definitely lead into, the overtraining side of things and just packing that on and then just elevating that cortisol stress even more. It's probably the last thing that person really needs at the moment.
Exactly. I mean, then they just go down this really dangerous path of, if somebody gets into, we could debate adrenal fatigue and whether that's real or, what that proper terminology is, but we'll just call it that for the sake of the argument because people know what we're talking about. But you don't want to go down that path. You're going to have to dig yourself out of a really deep hole. And nobody, wants to go there. So we have to mitigate our stress to support our nervous system. We need to get into our parasympathetic nervous system as much as possible because we're all in our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight. We're in that all the time. Americans are not good at, getting into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest. And we don't digest our food well, like you mentioned. Yeah. And it just leads to these long-term issues that is very, very difficult to overcome. So we have to mitigate stress. And the great thing about that is that you can choose what works best for you. It could be meditation, it could be yoga, it could be prayer, it could be laughter, it could be walking, playing with your kids, playing with your pets, whatever. There's so many different ways to do it, but we have to make it a priority. Yeah. And I hear from my clients all the time, the more they do this, the more productive they become. Right. The better they feel, the better they sleep, the better they digest. Everything falls into place. So, if you have to choose between going to your workout and mitigating stress, I'm probably going to pick the stress mitigation.
Right. Yeah. Right. That is something that I'll talk about a lot with women specifically, as well as understanding the hormone cycle. And there are definitely certain times within that where your body is more, carb sensitive, or maybe, fat is a little bit better. Like your prime fat burning time is actually the time where you want to be more tapped into your parasympathetic nervous system versus your sympathetic. And that's really hard for people to understand or women to understand because they think that, they need to be little cardio bunnies to drop the fat. And it's like, nope, actually your prime time to use fat for energy and lose a little is actually the times where you should be going for like a conversational, pace cardio, like a walk or some yoga or some, a gentle bike or whatever it is. That's a big missed part.
Totally. I've noticed over the years that I used to kill it in the gym all the time. And I was one of these people that would go to the gym like 2 to 3 hours a day. It was ridiculous. But I would notice at the times where I couldn't make it, that like my weight management was much easier. Yeah. When I wasn't killing it at the gym.
Yeah. Yeah. I went through a hip injury where I was kind of forced to stay out of the gym for a while. It was like anytime I did any kind of training, it flared up and it was awful. And it was definitely a signal, from the body to back off. But I did find that during that time, this is when I was more tapped into, eating a little bit slower, being a little bit more mindful of that kind of stuff. I had a pretty good morning routine in place, and then really tapping into that time, where I knew it was prime fat burning and just going for walks, like walking was something I could do. So I was walking like 3 miles every morning. Wow. And I found myself like maintaining and feeling better than I had in a long time, being in the gym, killing it with, heavy barbells and things like that. So it is, people underestimate, I think, the power of just a good walk.
Absolutely. Yeah. Agreed.
Amazing. All right. And then food and drink.
So, this is pretty self-explanatory, but, kind of identifying what foods are supporting us and what foods are not. And this includes beverages. A lot of people are drinking a lot of stuff and they don't count it as food, but it is. Right.
I suppose that goes into like caffeine consumption and sodas and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we could be eating a lot of foods that are inflammatory to us, which are perfectly healthy foods, but are not supporting our body. So this module just kind of gets into how to identify, which foods are working for us and which foods might be working against us. It's self-explanatory, but it can get a little bit complicated if we're dealing with something like an oxalate issue. So, several years ago, I took an organic acids test, which is a urine test to look at different metabolites in the body. And I had no clue that I had exponentially high oxalates. And oxalates are like little crystals that can really do a lot of damage to our body's tissues.
Okay.
And so where do oxalates come from? Oh, kale, spinach, all of these really super popular.
Healthy. Yeah.
super healthy
Superfoods.
Yeah. These are the superfoods, right? And I was sucking down smoothies with all of this stuff in it all the time. And I had no idea. So that was super helpful for me to identify. I had to go on a low oxalate diet, and there's a lot of different ways to manage that. But it was super helpful. And I didn't realize that that was causing a lot of nervous system issues for me, and it was dramatically impacting my sleep. And that's just one example. There's a lot of other stuff that people are doing. It could be gut infections or microbial overgrowth or, whatever the food is feeding. So the module just kind of dives into how to identify what's going on and how to figure out which foods are working for you and which foods aren't.
Is that how to identify it by doing a test as well, like a urine test, or is it maybe how to identify it without having to go through that?
Both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's great to have the lab work done, but the lab work is expensive. And I realize not everybody wants to do that.
Right.
So, keeping a food journal, it's hard for people to do, but that is the best way.
Very helpful.
Yeah. It's the best way to identify. And then, maybe avoiding a certain group of foods, like maybe it's nightshades for one person. So you avoid that for a month or two. And it's challenging for people. Anytime you want to restrict a food source from somebody, that's difficult. But, understanding the different classifications of what foods can be doing to you, having some awareness around that, and then paying attention to how your body's responding can actually shed a lot of light. A lot of light bulbs will go off for people.
Right. Right. Well, you mentioned nightshades. Can you clarify what are considered nightshades?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Nightshades are what? Tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, white potatoes. I might be missing one. Those are the main ones.
Mm-hmm.
And nightshades can be really inflammatory for a lot of people. So people with joint pain or arthritic pain, that kind of thing, a lot of times nightshades can be exacerbating that.
What is it about them that?
It's a certain alkaloid in the nightshades. For a certain subset of people, it's just causing this inflammatory response, specifically in the joints.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of people do a lot better when they take out
some of that
peppers and tomatoes and eggplants, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. It's kind of the opposite because we hear about these things being so healthy for us.
I know.
But just understanding your own, like you said, your body has its own little universe happening inside of it. Exactly. And you have to understand what's going on with it. Amazing. Right. And then some other issues around sleep, like we've mentioned snoring just briefly, but I know oral health is something that you had also mentioned. And that's one that I'm particularly very interested because I think that goes a lot with the snoring, but I think that is one that it's relatively new. And I don't think a lot of people are thinking about maybe oral health and sleep.
So oral health and sleep is incredibly fascinating. Mm-hmm. So are you familiar with the work of Weston A. Price?
No.
Okay. So Weston Price was a dentist in the early 1900s.
Okay.
And he started to, I think his brother maybe worked for like National Geographic or something and did a lot of world travel. And they started to have these conversations about people that they would meet in other countries and how their jaws and their facial structure was completely different. So being a dentist, Weston A. Price was like, this is super interesting. Why is their bone structure and their facial structure so different than, what's happening in America or in England or the Western world. So he started to travel internationally and look at these people eating traditional diets. And he was comparing them with people who were eating kind of, a Western modernized diet. And what he found was that people eating their traditional diets, did not have teeth crowding. Like in America, everybody needs braces, right? Because their teeth are all smushed together and they've got these really tiny mouths. And that's not normal. Our teeth should not be, kind of overlapping each other. We shouldn't have to have our wisdom teeth pulled. But what he found is when we're eating these really high grain-based diets without this more or less nutrient void, our palates and our bone structure is actually developing inappropriately. So it's very small. So if you look at people eating traditional diets, like they're fermenting their foods, they're eating foods that, they used to hunt and gather, or just traditional diets, their bone structure is much wider. Their palates are much wider. And they have room for all their teeth. They don't have this crowding in the palate. And what we know now is that these smaller palates really obstruct airflow and obstruct breathing. So we don't get good oxygenation, and we're having problems getting adequate air and just these respiratory issues because our palates are so small.
Interesting.
I know, it's super interesting. So there are actually dentists and probably other practitioners that make devices that you can wear kind of like a retainer that helps to kind of stretch out your palate so that you can get, better breathing capacity, better oxygenation. Because when we don't have good oxygenation, our nervous system's freaking out and it's thinking it's in trouble.
Yeah.
Right. So we're in this kind of fight or flight mode all the time because we're not getting good respiration.
I had braces when I was younger. My sister had just messaged me the other day because my niece is going in to get hers. And she asked me if I had a palate expander. And I didn't know what that was, but apparently my niece is having to get one. So this is very interesting.
Well, that's awesome. That's really good for her. That's going to be, that's going to have a lot of health benefits for her if they're expanding her palate.
That. Yeah.
Cool.
Amazing. Yeah. She showed me like the device that they have to put in there to get, it looks kind of painful and awful, but
probably is,
knowing, long-term of the benefits of that. That's awesome that at least her dentist is in touch with that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So maybe it's becoming a little bit more mainstream, or I wonder if that dentist has a little bit of a holistic awareness or something.
I hope so.
Then, as far as the snoring goes, that's going to be part of it. And then also I have, in the last couple of years, started taping my mouth closed at night.
I've heard of people doing this.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's awesome because when we breathe through our mouths, typically in nature, the only reason we would breathe through our mouth is because we're running away.
Right.
Right. We have to take a
fight or flight.
Yeah, it's fight or flight. Because when we're just sitting here calm and relaxed, our mouth is not open. We're breathing through our nose. So nasal breathing is very important for nervous system, sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system. But when we're breathing with our mouth open, that's telling our body, I'm in a state of distress and we don't get good oxygenation, and it's not supportive for sleep. And so many people, especially if you're sleeping on your back, in the middle of the night, their mouth falls open and they start breathing through their mouth, and then, or you're snoring, and then that's not conducive for getting into really deep and good quality sleep. So if you tape your mouth shut, actually that's going to prevent any mouth breathing. And I have heard from a lot of people that actually helps significantly for snoring.
Okay.
So, it's kind of, I don't know, it's weird. It's a little uncomfortable, but it's really helpful.
You get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah, you get used to it. And then, I noticed it. Like last night, actually, my tape, I had a roll of tape and I threw my sheets in the wash and I didn't realize the tape was in there.
Oh no.
I know. I was like, oh, sugar. So I didn't have tape last night.
Oh, okay.
I noticed in the middle of the night, I woke up probably 3 times, and I was like breathing through my mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, this is why I'm waking up.
Yeah. What kind of tape do you need?
You can just get like that white medical tape.
Okay.
It's like micropore. What's it called? I don't know. Just the little small white rolls of medical tape. Actually, I saw on Amazon a couple weeks ago, they're actually making tape specifically for this purpose now.
Amazing.
I know. It's probably more expensive, but it's probably, I don't know, maybe a little bit more comfortable. And I guess it has like a little slit in the middle. So I don't know, for comfort reasons. I haven't tried it, but people are catching on to it.
Yeah. And I think there's also with open mouth breathing at night, I know we've talked a little bit, like gut and health, being very important for being in the right, circadian rhythm and blood sugar balance and all that kind of stuff. But I think your mouth also has its own microbiome, and breathing through your mouth, I think, invites a lot of bad bacteria and things that can throw off the biome there as well. So dental
sure.
health wise, I know that that's something that's kind of tied to it.
Yeah. And drying it, when you're breathing through your mouth, you get all that dry air. Yeah. It does negatively affect the microbial balance in your mouth too.
Bodies are amazing.
So cool. I know.
Mind blown. Are there any other issues that you wanted to kind of touch base on within the course?
Oh gosh. I mean, we just gave people a lot.
A lot. Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot more in the course that we go into, like, hormone balancing and how to identify if you have a gut infection.
Right.
All of these kind of a little bit more complicated situations. But I mean, I think that's a really good overview. If people are going to put into place some of these things that we talked about, that's going to be very, very dramatic for a lot of people. So
right. And just, I know it can seem overwhelming of all the topics that we talked about, but like we said, just, tapping into maybe one and just taking a little inventory and some awareness first, I think, before going through. But if they are interested in kind of going through this guided process of really figuring it out with you in the course, what is the process for getting enrolled and, like time commitment of the course and interaction and things like what is kind of the,
so if you want to kind of check it out and look into the course a little bit more, you can go to thesleepeasymethod.com/enroll. And that's, the page where I list everything that's involved, everything that you get in the program. It's ideally an 8-week course. So somebody will go through one module per week. And at the end of 8 weeks, they'll have all of the information and all of the action steps that they need to take. So I have like checklists and handouts in each module. So I make it really easy for people to, go through each of the steps because, I mean, it's a lot, when we're mitigating EMFs, we're doing the blue light, we're doing circadian rhythm. It's a lot of stuff. But you have lifetime access to the course. So you can take it at your own pace.
Cool.
So you can go through each module and just, slowly make changes as you go along. And then we have weekly Q&A sessions. So if somebody's really struggling and, they can't quite dial it in at those weekly Q&A sessions, that's an amazing time to get, one-on-one support and, also to kind of figure out what's working for other people. So we have a Facebook community, which is really supportive and great.
Yeah.
You can sign up for the program at thesleepeasymethod.com/enroll. And then I'm going to do a webinar on the 27th of February that just kind of talks through the program. And I'd go into a little bit deeper on some of these topics and give people, some fun bonuses and stuff, some handouts and guides if people wanted to learn more about it. And then if anybody, has questions, just reach out to me and ask. I'm totally available. I'm one of these people that answers every single email and every single phone call. I don't do anymore, but I can't leave an email or a phone call, unaddressed. So just reach out and I'd be happy to discuss it.
Amazing. Okay. So February 27th is the enrollment start date or deadline?
The 27th is the webinar.
Okay.
People can sign up for the program now.
Okay. Great.
It's all ready to go. People can sign up. And the deadline is March 5th.
March 5th. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the course starts on March 8th.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming back and talking to us about that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad we could get this information out there, and it's always fun to chat with you guys. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. And then we'll link those things definitely in our show notes for people that are interested in looking forward to that. I don't want to direct people to too many things, but the current Facebook group that you have, you want to give us a shout out of that name?
Oh yeah, it's called the Easy Sleepers.
Easy Sleepers. Yeah, I've joined that one. I love it. So
cool.
Yeah, great one for people to keep up on all this information with as well.
Yep.
So, awesome. Thanks for joining us, Cathy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. You can also find us on Instagram at The Project Kuwait. Thank you, and join us next time.